Welcome to episode 4 of How to Train Your Dragons. Remember that this is not like the movie. Okay, we're going to start right here. It is a little known fact that dragons grow colder the deeper they sleep. It is even possible for a dragon to go into a sleep coma in which they are icy cold, with no obvious pulse or breath or heartbeat. They can stay in this state for centuries, and only a highly skilled expert can tell from looking at them if they are alive or dead. But a dragon who is awake or lightly sleeping is very warm indeed, like bread that has just come out of the oven. Hiccup found one that was about the right size and fairly cool to the touch, and maneuvered it into his bread basket as quickly and carefully as he could. It was a very basic brown, but at the moment Hiccup could not have cared less. Even though it was barely half grown, it was surprisingly heavy. I did it! I did it! I did it! He chanted happily to himself. At least he wasn't going to be the only boy in the class who didn't have a dragon. Everybody seemed to have got themselves one by now, and they were all making their way quietly toward the exit. Everyone, that is, except for Fishlegs, who was already covered in a bright red, itchy rash, and was at that very moment approaching a pile of knottily entangled natters on very loud tiptoes. Fishlegs was even worse at burglary than Dog's Breath. Hiccup stopped dead in his tracks. "Don't do it, Fishlegs. Please don't do it," he whispered. But Fishlegs was fed up of Snotlout's taunting and of being sneered at and jeered at. He was going to get himself a really cool dragon that all the other boys would respect. Squinting so hard he could barely see the pile of dragons, his eyes streaming and scratching himself violently, Fishlegs reached slowly toward the most dragon, took one leg in his hand, and gently yanked. The entire pile came crashing down in a furious tangle of limbs and wings and ears. Every boy in the cavern gave a horrified gasp. Most of the natters snapped crossly at each other before settling back down to sleep. One brute, bigger than the others, opened his eyes and blinked a few times. Hiccup noted with relief that the third eyelid was still down. The boys waited for the eyes to close, and then Fishlegs sneezed. 4 gigantic sneezes that went echoing and bouncing off the cavern walls. "Achoo! Achoo! Achoo! Achoo!" But very faintly an ominous purring noise began in his throat. Oh, the big natter stared slightly ahead, frozen like a statue, but very faintly an ominous purring noise began in his throat. And very slowly the third eye slid open. "Uh-oh," whispered Hiccup. The natter's head suddenly whipped around to face Fishlegs, its yellow cat eyes snapping into focus on the boy. It unfolded its wings to their greatest extent and stealthily advanced, like a panther about to spring. It opened its mouth wide to show the forked dragon tongue, and "Run!" shouted Hiccup, grabbing Fishlegs and dragging him away. The boys ran for the exit tunnel. Fishlegs and Hiccup were the last to get there. There was no time to pick up the torches, so they were running to the pitch dark. The basket with the basic brown dragon in it was bumping on Hiccup's back. They had 2 minutes to start on the 2 minutes start on the dragon, because it took a while for the first dragon to wake everybody else up. But Hiccup could hear a furious roaring and flapping as the dragons started to pour into the tunnels after the boys. He ran a little faster. The dragons could move more quickly than the boys could because they could see they could see better in the dark, but they were held up when the tunnel got smaller because they had to fold their wings up to squirm through. I have to get a dragon, panted Fishlegs a couple of paces behind Hiccup. That, said Hiccup as he scrambled frantically on his elbows through a narrow bit. It is the least, of our problems. They're gaining on us. No, dragon, repeated Fishleg stubbornly. Oh, for Thor's sake, snapped Hiccup. He thrust his basket into Fishleg's arms and grabbed the empty one from Fishleg's back. Have mine! Then wait here! And Hiccup turned and went back through the narrow bit, even though the roaring was getting louder and closer by the second. What are you doing? Screamed Fishlegs, frantically dancing up and down on the spot. Hiccup came back through the hole again. Precious moments later, Fishlegs grabbed hold of an arm to help haul him through. So this is the flight of them trying to get out. They could hear horrible snuffing as what sounded like the noise of dragons entered the other end of the hole. Hiccup bungled a rock at it, and it squealed indignantly. They turned a corner, and suddenly they could see light from outside at the end of the final tunnel. Fishlegs went first, but just as Hiccup was kneeling down to follow, a dragon pounced on him with a flap and a shriek. Hiccup hit it, and it fell back enough for him to crawl towards the light. Another dragon, or maybe the same one, sank its fangs into Hiccup's calf. He was so desperate to get out of there, he dragged the animal through with him. As soon as Hiccup's head and shoulders were through into the light, there was Gobber. He grabbed Hiccup under the armpits and hauled him out, dragons pouring after him. Jump! Yelled Gobber as he stunned a dragon with one blow of his mighty fist. They could be meaty too. What do you mean, jump? He probably said it more like, what do you mean, jump? Hiccup hesitated as he looked down at the dizzying drop into the sea. No time to climb down, panted Gobber, banging a couple of dragon heads together and bouncing 3 more off his gigantic belly. Jump! Hiccup closed his eyes and leaped off the cliff. As he plunged through the air, the dragon that was attached to his leg released its jaws with a squawk of alarm and flew off. Hiccup was traveling at such speed by the time he hit the water that it didn't feel like water at all, more like something hard and painful, and so cold that he nearly passed out. He spluttered to the surface, amazed to find that he didn't appear to be dead, and was immediately drenched by the gigantic splash of Gobber the Belch, landing a couple of feet away from him. Shrieking furiously, the dragon swarmed out of the cave and dive-bombed the floating Vikings. He pulled his helmet as far as he could, or as far down as it would go. There were horrible scraping sounds as dragon's talons raked across the metal. Another one landed hissing on the water right in front of Hiccup's face. It took off again and screeched when it felt how cold the sea was. The dragon didn't like flying through the snow, and with relief, Hiccup watched as they flew back to scream terrible dragon insults in dragonese from the warmth of the cave entrance. Gobber started to pull the boys out of the sea. And on the rock, Viking boys are strong. Oh, and onto the rocks. Viking boys are strong swimmers, but it is difficult to keep afloat when you have a basket full of trapped, terrified dragons on your back. Hiccup was the last to be saved just in time as the cold was beginning to put him to sleep. Well, at least that wasn't death, thought Hiccup, as Gobber grabbed him by the neck to rescue him, but drowning himself again in the process but it certainly wasn't glory either. And there he is. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that part. Next episode, we will read chapter 3.